The Galactic Council chamber hummed with panic as holographic displays painted the room in shades of crimson and amber. Each flashing icon representing another star system consumed by the Kresh. Swarm High Chancellor Tevrin stood at the center podium, his forearms trembling as he watched the tactical display update in real-time. Sector 7-9 has gone dark, announced Military Coordinator Jill, her crystalline form refracting the warning lights into 1,000 fractured beams. That makes 16 systems in the last solar cycle around the circular chamber. Representatives from 43 species watched in growing horror as the red tide of Kresh advancement spread across the galactic map like spilled blood. The swarm had appeared from beyond the galactic rim 3 years ago, a writhing mass of biological ships that consumed everything in their path. Planets, stations, entire civilizations vanished into the Crush Collective. Their mass converted into more ships, more soldiers, more hunger. The Council had tried diplomacy first. As was their way, they sent envoys with messages of peace and offers of negotiation. The Kresh consumed the envoys, tried economic sanctions, then blockades, then finally military action. But the Council races had enjoyed 12,000 years of peace. Their warships were little more than patrol vessels with light defensive armaments. Kresh tore through them like paper. Our projections show complete Council territory saturation within 2 years, Jill continued, her voice cracking with static. Evacuation protocols cannot move even a fraction of our populations in that time frame. Tevrin's primary eyes closed in despair. He had led the Council for 3 centuries, guiding his people through trade disputes and territorial negotiations. Never had he imagined facing the extinction of galactic civilization itself. Are there no options remaining? Asked Ambassador Vareth, a young diplomat from the Solarian Consortium. No allies we have not yet contacted? The chamber fell silent. Every major power in the galaxy was already part of the Council or had been consumed by the swarm then. From the back of the chamber, a voice spoke. There is one possibility. Historian Calmeth shuffled forward. His ancient frame, supported by anti-gravity, harnessed. The elderly scholar carried a data tablet that looked older than some of the species present. 217 standard years ago, we received a first contact response beacon from a primitive world in Sector 12. Calmeth explained. The inhabitants called their planet Earth. Tevrin's antennae perked up slightly. I recall reading about that contact in Academy. You said a pre-space flight civilization? Barely unified. Still using chemical rockets, correct? Calmeth confirmed. We classified them as Tier 7 primitive and marked their system as off-limits for cultural contamination protocols. Jill demanded. We need warships, not anthropological curiosities. Calmeth tapped his tablet, projecting a translation of Earth's original response message into the center of the chamber. Crude electromagnetic signal had been cleaned up and converted to standard galactic script, but its essence remained. Greetings to the stars. The message read, we are humanity. Children of Earth, we reach out in friendship to all peaceful species. Know that we are a young race learning to walk among the cosmos. We hope for peace, but we protect our own should you ever need aid. Remember that humanity stands ready. The chamber remained quiet as representatives absorbed the primitive message. They mentioned protecting their own, Vareth said slowly, and offering aid if needed. A symbolic gesture from a species that barely had orbital capability. Jill scoffed. What could they possibly offer us now? A few dozen chemical propellant missiles? Perhaps nothing, Calmeth admitted, but we have exhausted all other options at worst. They ignore our message at best. They might have developed some basic space capability and could offer a handful of ships. Tevrin looked around the chamber at the desperate faces of 43. Civilization's pride seemed like a luxury they could no longer afford. Send the message, he ordered. Use the same frequency as their original beacon. Request any assistance they can provide. It took Calmeth 3 hours to compose the message and aim the transmission array toward Sector 12. The signal lanced across the void at light speed, carrying the Council's desperate plea to a world they had dismissed as irrelevant.
Ow.
Centuries ago, the message will take 6 standard days to reach Earth, Calmeth reported. If they still exist, and if they respond, we should hear back in 12 days. Those 12 days felt like 12 years. The Kresh continued their advance, consuming another for Systems Council military forces, threw themselves into delaying actions, sacrificing ships and lives to buy civilians time to evacuate temporary refugee camps swelled with displaced populations. Aaron barely slept, spending his nights watching casualty reports and evacuation figures scroll past his vision in the morning of the 13th day. Calmeth burst into the High Chancellor's office without announcing himself. They responded. The old historian gasped, his anti-gravity harness stuttering with his excitement. Ivrin shot to his feet, all four arms reaching for the data tablet. Calmeth offered. The message was short, transmitted in perfect Galactic standard with only the slightest accent quirks that suggested machine translation. Received your distress call. The message began. We remember the Council's greeting from long ago. Fleet en route to your coordinates. Hold your position and maintain defensive perimeter. Estimated time of arrival 72 standard hours. Humanity remembers its promises. Tevrin read the message 3 times, his mind struggling to process the words fleet. He said aloud. They said, fleet. Perhaps they have developed a small defensive force, Roth suggested, having rushed to the office when she heard the news. A dozen ships. 20. Any addition to our forces could make a difference. Tevrin wanted to feel hope, but he had learned to temper his expectations. Still, humanity had responded, which was more than he had dared to dream. Prepare a reception for our new allies, he ordered, and may the ancestors grant that they bring something useful. What Tevrin did not know, what none of the Council could know, was that Earth had not remained the primitive world they remembered. Humanity had taken the Council's first contact message as proof. They were not alone in a hostile universe. They had also taken it as proof that the universe might one day become hostile. 2 centuries of preparation were about to arrive at the Council's doorstep in 72 hours. The galaxy would learn what happened when you asked humanity for help. They would learn that humans had spent 200 years preparing for this exact calendar. They would learn that when humanity promised to protect their own, they meant everyone who asked. The Council Defense Station hung in space like a dying star. It's normally brilliant. Lights dimmed to emergency power as it coordinated the exodus of 3 billion refugees from the surrounding system. Tevrin stood in the observation deck alongside Varoth and a dozen other Council members, their eyes fixed on the empty space where humanity had promised to arrive. 72 hours have passed. Jel announced from her position at the sensor station they should be here now. If they were coming at all, perhaps their navigation was imprecise, Vareth offered. Though her voice carried little conviction. Give them time. The words had barely left her translator when every sensor array on the station screamed warnings. Simultaneously, spatial distortions detected, Jel shouted, her crystalline body flashing with alarm colors. Multiple breaches in real space. Massive energy signatures type. Tevrin demanded unknown, Jeel replied, her voice rising with each word. The signatures do not match any recorded FTL technology in the galactic database. Energy readings are off the scale. The space before them began to tear, not the gentle shimmer and fold of standard faster-than-light drives that slip ships between dimensions like sliding a blade between silk sheets. This was violent. Reality itself seemed to scream as massive rifts opened in the fabric of space-time. Wounds in the universe that bled light and radiation. From the first rift emerged a ship that made Tevrin's breath catch in all 3 of his lungs. The vessel was enormous. Isley, 3 times the size of the Council's largest dreadnought's hull, was the color of storm clouds. Dark metal plating that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Weapons bristled from every surface. Massive cannon batteries, missile pods, point defense clusters, and devices whose purpose Tevrin could not even guess. The ship's bow bore markings in Earth's symbolic language. And beneath that, an image that sent chills through Tevrin's spine, a massive predatory bird with outstretched talons, painted in white against the dark hull count. Tevrin whispered more rifts were opening now, dozens of them, each vomiting forth another warship. Smaller vessels poured through like schools of hunting fish, their sleek forms darting into formation with practiced precision. Massive carriers disgorged clouds of even smaller craft. Single-pilot fighters that would be suicide vessels by Council standards. No species would put lone Individuals into such fragile ships, yet here were thousands of them, swarming into defensive patterns with terrifying coordination. Current count: 247 ships, Jell reported, her voice hollow with shock. No, wait. Correction. More contacts emerging: 291, 308. 326, the numbers kept climbing when the last rift finally sealed. Space around the Council Station had transformed where there had been empty void now floated an armada of 312 warships, organized into battle groups with a precision that spoke of centuries of military doctrine. The Council representatives stood in stunned silence, trying to comprehend what they were seeing. These were not the few dozen patrol craft they had hoped for. This was a war fleet. Communication requests chimed through the stations. Stevrin's hand shook as he accepted it. Holographic display resolved into the image of a human male. His skin darker than the void of space, his face marked with age lines that suggested considerable experience. He wore a uniform of deep blue with golden insignia that glittered in the bridge lights behind him. High Chancellor Tevrin, I presume? The human said in flawless galactic standard, his accent barely noticeable. I am Admiral James Hassan, commanding officer of the United Earth Naval Ship, indomitable and fleet commander of the Human Rapid Response Group. Rapid Response Group, the words echoed in Tevrin's mind. This overwhelming display of military might was their rapid response. Admiral Hassan, Tevrin managed, struggling to keep his voice steady. We are grateful for your arrival. Your fleet is far more substantial than we anticipated. Hassan's expression remained neutral. Professional, we received your distress call and came as quickly as possible. He said, we understand you are facing an extinction-level threat from a hostile swarm entity. Please transmit all tactical data you have collected on this. Enemy Verith moved to a control. Panelin began uploading the Council's complete intelligence files on the creche. Swarmhayaz's eyes flickered as he reviewed the data on displays outside the holographic pickup range. His face grew darker with each passing second. This is everything, Hassan asked finally. 3 years of contact, and this is your complete tactical assessment. We have done our best, GL said defensively. The creche are unlike any enemy we have encountered. They adapt quickly and their numbers seem endless. Hassan nodded slowly, his expression softening slightly. I understand, said. You are not a military civilization. The records indicate the Council has been at peace for 12,000 years. That is admirable. Truly, but it means you were not prepared for this. Can you help us? Tevrin asked, hating how small his voice sounded. Hassan's eyes hardened into something that reminded Tevrin of the predatory bird on his ship's bow. Hi, Chancellor. You sent a distress call asking for aid. The Admiral said you asked if we could send a few ships to help defend your people. I need you to understand something clearly. Earth does not do half measures. When humanity received your call, we did not debate whether to help, we debated how much force to bring. He leaned forward, and for the first time since the transmission began, Tevrin saw something dangerous in the human's eyes. You asked for aid, Hassan continued. We brought war. The bridge of the Indomitable became visible in the background of the transmission, and Tevrin saw dozens of humans working at stations with focused intensity. Every one of them wore the same expression. Grim determination mixed with something that took Tevrin a moment to identify. They were angry. These humans had traveled across the galaxy, not out of obligation or political necessity, but because someone had called for help against extinction, and humanity had apparently taken that personally. The creche swarm, Hassan said, returning his attention to the tactical display. Based on your data, they are approaching this sector in a tendril formation, approximately 4 million biological ships strong. They will reach Council core worlds within 14 standard days. That assessment is correct, Geo confirmed. Then, we have work to do. Hassan stated, I am transmitting fleet coordination protocols to your station. We will need real-time sensor data, logistic support, and evacuation routes for civilian populations. My ships will establish a defensive perimeter at coordinates I am sending now, Admiral, Tevrin interrupted. With respect, the creche tendril numbers in the millions. Your fleet, while impressive, numbers only in the hundreds, even with your obvious technological advantages. The numerical disparity will be irrelevant. Hassan cut him off. Not unkindly, High Chancellor. Humanity has been preparing for this exact scenario for 2 centuries. We have war-gamed swarm intelligence, developed counter-tactics, and built weapons specifically designed to face enemies that outnumber us thousands to 1. Do you know why? Tevrin shook his head because we thought we were alone. Hassan said quietly, your first contact message 200 years ago was the most wonderful and terrifying thing we had ever received. Wonderful because we were not alone, terrifying because if there was intelligent life out there, there might also be something that wanted to destroy it, so we prepared, we never stopped preparing. A proximity alarm blared through the station crash scouts detected at the system edge. Jill announced 6 biological ships, moving at high velocity toward our position. Hassan glanced at something off-screen. Interceptor Group 7. You have engagement authority, he said calmly. Weapons free on the tactical display. 6 small human fighters broke formation and accelerated toward the approaching crash. Scouts, the council representatives, watched in fascination as the tiny craft moved with impossible agility, their pilots pulling maneuvers that would kill most species from the gravitational forces alone. Engagement lasted 17 seconds when it ended. All 6 crash scouts were expanding clouds of biological debris. Not one human fighter had been scratched, contact destroyed. Returning to formation, a young voice reported over the communication channel. Hassan returned his attention to Tevrin. The crash detected our arrival, he said. They will redirect their tendril toward this position to investigate. They will want to know what we are. His expression turned cold. We are going to show them. The crash tendril approached like a living nightmare through the long-range sensors. Vareth watched the biological ships move with disturbing coordination. Each vessel was grown rather than built, composed of chitinous armor and organic weapons that spat concentrated acid and penetrating spines. They moved as one organism because they were one organism. Millions of individual ships controlled by a single distributed intelligence enemy. Forces number 3 points. 7 million vessels. Jill reported from her station on the Council defense platform. They are maintaining a broad front approach. Standard crash saturation tactics. Admiral Hassan stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, studying the same tactical display with an expression that reminded Vareth of a chess master contemplating an opening move. Human fleet had moved forward from the Council's defensive line, establishing positions in deep space between the crash tendril and the populated systems behind them. They are advancing to meet the enemy, Tevrin said, his voice thick with concern. Why would they give up the defensive advantages of our fortified positions? Because defense is not how you win wars, Vareth murmured, beginning to understand something fundamental about humanity. It is how you survive them. Hassan's voice came through the communication channel, addressing not just the Indomitable, but every ship in the human fleet. All ships. This is Fleet Command, he said, his tone carrying the weight of absolute authority. We are establishing formation designated Iron Wall at coordinates transmitted. Battle groups Alpha through Delta will form the primary engagement line. Carriers Echo and Foxtrot will maintain position at negative Z-axis. Fighter groups on standby destroyer screens will establish point defense, perimeter, the human ships moved with a precision that amazed the Council. Observers 300 vessels organized themselves into a layered defensive formation that looked deceptively simple but radiated tactical sophistication. Massive dreadnoughts formed the center line, their weapon batteries already charging with energy signatures that made the Council's sensors struggle to track smaller cruisers and destroyers. Ranged themselves in overlapping fields of fire, creating zones where nothing could pass without facing attacks from multiple angles simultaneously. The Kresh had begun their attack run. Jell announced all enemy vessels accelerating to assault velocity. The tendril compressed as it approached, focusing its mass like a biological battering ram aimed at punching through the human line. 4 million ships moving as one predatory organism. Voreth's hands clenched as she watched the two forces close. Human fleet is holding position. Jail reported they are not falling back. They are not even trying to evade. Why are they just waiting? Hassan answered that question with a single word. Fire. The human fleet opened fire. What followed made Vareth understand why the Council had never developed true military technology. The dreadnoughts launched salvos of missiles that crossed the void in seconds. Each missile carried a nuclear warhead that would have been banned under Council weapons conventions had humanity been part of those treaties. But humanity was not part of those treaties. Dozens of atomic fireballs bloomed in space as missiles detonated among the leading edge of the crash. Swarmed thousands of biological ships simply ceased to exist. Vaporized by temperatures that matched stellar cores, the survivors pressed on. Closing the distance, the human railguns began firing next. These were kinetic weapons that used magnetic acceleration to launch projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. Explosive warheads. No energy beams, just solid slugs of dense metal moving so fast they struck with the force of tactical nuclear weapons. Projectiles punched through Krish bioships like paper, each round passing through multiple targets before finally dissipating its momentum when the Kresh reached close engagement range. The human point defense systems activated. Every destroyer, cruiser, and battleship in the fleet bristled with automated weapons that tracked and destroyed incoming targets with mechanical precision. Space between the fleets became a wall of fire as thousands of defensive guns created a barrier that nothing living could cross-crash. Acid spitters and spine launchers found their projectiles intercepted before they could reach human hulls. Impossible, Jel whispered, watching her displays the accuracy, the rate of fire. No biological entity could coordinate defensive fire at this level. The humans are using artificial intelligence. Vareth realized computers making targeting decisions faster than any living mind could process, but numbers eventually began to tell. The Kresh adapted with the speed only a hive mind could achieve. They learned to vary their approach vectors, to sacrifice ships, to overwhelm local defensive grids, to focus fire on individual human vessels. The destroyer, UENS Defiant, took concentrated fire from 1,000 Kresh ships and broke apart. Its hull breached in a dozen places. More human ships fell as the battle progressed. Cruisers, frigates. Even one of the mighty battleships succumbed to the sheer weight of biological mass thrown against it. Human casualties mounting, reported. Her voice strained. 41 vessels destroyed. Another 63 reporting significant damage. The Kresh are pushing through sections of their defensive line, Tevrin watched in horror as more icons representing human ships winked out on the tactical display. Tens of thousands of individuals dying with each lost vessel. They are being overwhelmed, he said. We must evacuate. Their sacrifice will buy us time, but all fleet elements. Hassan's voice cut through the communication channel with icy calm. Execute withdrawal sequence Gamma 7, fall back to Point Verdun. The human fleet began to retreat. Their withdrawal, as coordinated as their initial deployment, ships provided covering fire for each other. Maintaining defensive formations even as they gave ground. They are running. One of the council observers said. No, Vareth corrected, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. Look at how they are moving. That is not a rout. It is something else. The Kresh sensed victory and pressed harder, pouring through gaps in the human line there. Bioships surged forward in a tide of chitin and acid hosts and watched the Kresh advance on his tactical plot. Counting down in his head when the enemy concentration reached the predetermined coordinates, he gave the order that would define the battle. All ships. Activate Kasaba Protocol Authorization. Hassano 5 and 9er. Akuna. May God have mercy on our souls throughout the fleet. Weapons that had remained dormant suddenly came online. These were not conventional nuclear missiles. They were Kasaba howitzers, directed nuclear devices that focused the energy of atomic detonations into concentrated plasma jets capable of cutting through anything in their path. The human fleet had led the Kresh into a kill zone. Dozens of pre-positioned devices detonated simultaneously, creating a three-dimensional grid of nuclear lance strikes that carved through the concentrated Kresh formation like blades through flesh. Millions of biological ships died in seconds. Light from the detonations was so intense that the council station's viewports automatically darkened too. Prevent damage to sensitive eyes when the display cleared. Vareth saw that the Kresh tendril had been effectively destroyed. What remained was scattered debris and perhaps 10% of the original force. Those ships that had been too far from the kill zone to be caught in the Holocaust, the surviving Kresh vessels stopped their advance for the first time since encountering them. The Council saw the swarm hesitate. The hive mind was processing what had just happened, trying to understand what kind of species would use such devastating weapons against them. Hassan's voice came through the channel again, addressing both his fleet and the listening council representatives. All ships, reform defensive positions, damage control teams, assess casualties, and begin repairs. Stand by for enemy counter-response. Tevrin found his voice finally. Admiral, your casualties? There was a pause before Hassan answered. Preliminary reports indicate 47 ships lost. 83,216 personnel confirmed dead or missing. Another 36 ships severely damaged, but recoverable. The numbers hit Tevrin like a physical blow. 3,000 dead. The entire council military across all member species, numbered barely to million. Hassan had lost more people in a single engagement than most council worlds had in their entire military. I am so sorry, Tevrin whispered. That is a devastating loss. Hassan's expression on the holographic display was grim but unbowed. High Chancellor, those numbers represent acceptable casualties for the tactical objective achieved. We destroyed the Kresh advance and bought your civilian evacuations time. My people knew the risks when they volunteered for this mission. Acceptable casualties. The phrase chilled Vareth to her core. She was beginning to understand what kind of species humanity truly was. They did not just accept death in war. They planned for it, factored it into their strategies, and kept fighting anyway. The Kresh tendril began withdrawing, retreating back toward the galactic rim at high velocity. They had encountered something they did not understand. Prey that fought back with coordination, and weapons that made even a hive mind fear. Hassan watched them go with eyes that held no satisfaction. They will regroup, he said. They will adapt to our tactics and return with greater numbers. This was just the opening engagement. Tevrin felt hope and horror warring in his chest. Humanity had saved them, but at a cost he could barely comprehend. And the war, Hassan said, had only just begun. The memorial service aboard the UEN's Indomitable was unlike anything Varath had ever witnessed. She stood in the observation gallery alongside Tevrin and several other council representatives, watching as Admiral Hassan and his senior officers paid tribute to the fallen. No elaborate ceremonies, no speeches about glory or honor, simply names one by one. Hassan read the names of every person who had died in the battle, 83,216 of them. MIT took 14. Arsvareth noticed something that made her chest ache. Hassan's voice never wavered, never broke, but tears ran freely down his face as he read. When he finished, he stood at attention before a viewport showing the debris field where so many had died. They volunteered, he said simply. They knew the cost. We remember them. Tevrin had arranged for Vareth to remain aboard the Indomitable as a council liaison. And over the following days, she began to truly understand the species that had come to their rescue. She walked the corridors and saw young humans, some possibly young, barely adults by council standards, working at their stations with focused determination. Visited the medical bay and saw injured personnel, refusing sedation so they could return to duty. Faster Shea sat in the officers' mess and listened. Two humans discussed tactics and strategies, with a casual familiarity that spoke of lifelong study. One evening, Hassan invited her to his ready room for what humans called coffee, a stimulant beverage that smelled like burnt plant matter. You wanted to understand us, Hassan said, gesturing to a chair. Ask your questions. Ambassador Varath sat, organizing her thoughts carefully. Your species frightens me, she admitted, not because you are cruel or violent, but because you are so very good at violence. How did you become this way? Hassan was quiet for a moment, staring into his coffee cup. Do you know what the worst thing humanity ever did to itself was? He asked. We nearly destroyed our own world, not once, But repeatedly we developed nuclear weapons and came within minutes of annihilating our species multiple times. We fought wars that killed millions. We created technologies that could have ended all life on Earth. He looked up. Meeting her eyes, the council has been at peace for 12,000 years. Hassan continued, "That is beautiful. Truly, but Earth has never known lasting peace. We are a fractious species. Ambassador, we fight each other over resources, ideology, territory. Sometimes over things as simple as religious differences for most of our history. We were our own greatest threat, then why did you not destroy yourselves?" Vareth asked. Hassan smiled sadly. "Because we learned. Every war taught us something. Every near-extinction event showed us how close we were to the edge. We developed international laws, created global institutions, learned to talk before we started shooting. It took us thousands of years and countless deaths. But we learned, and when your first contact message arrived," Vareth prompted, "it changed everything," Hassan said. "Suddenly we knew we were not alone. And if we were not alone, that meant the universe might contain other threats, species that might not be interested in peace. So we unified, not perfectly, not without continued struggles. But we came together and we prepared for 200 years." Vareth said, "For a threat you had no proof existed, hope for the best. Prepare for the worst." Hassan quoted, "It is an old human saying, we hoped we would never need this fleet. But we built it anyway," a chime interrupted them. And Hassan accepted the incoming communication. It was his intelligence officer, Commander Yuki Tanaka, Admiral. "We have completed analysis of the Kresh tendril we engaged." Tanaka reported the data as concerning. Hassan gestured for her to continue. "Based on biological sampling and communications intercepts, we believe the tendril we destroyed represented approximately 3% of the total Kresh swarm mass." Tanaka said, "The main body is still advancing through the galactic arm, consuming systems along a 300 light-year front." Vareth felt her blood turn. Cold 3%, they had fought a desperate battle against what amounted to a scouting force estimated total swarm size. Hassan asked, his voice carefully controlled, "Somewhere between 100 and 150 million vessels." Tanaka replied, "And they are adapting. Intercepted biosignals suggest the hive mind is already incorporating data from the tendril we destroyed. They are learning about our tactics and weapons." Hassan dismissed Tanaka and turned to Vareth. Ambassador saw something in his eyes that terrified her more than the casualty reports. "Doubt you cannot fight them," she whispered, "even with your fleet?" The numbers are problematic." Hassan agreed. "The Rapid Response Group was designed to handle localized threats, not swarm entities of this magnitude. Then what do we do?" Vareth asked. Hassan stood and walked to the viewport. "Staring out at the stars, eye contact, Earth Command," he said, "and I request the rest of the fleet." Confusion must have shown on her face because Hassan explained, "Ambassador, the 300 ships you see here? This is the Rapid Response Group. We're designed to arrive quickly at trouble spots and hold the line until reinforcements arrive. We are not the full strength of human military capability. How many ships does Earth have?" Vareth asked, almost afraid of the answer. Hassan was quiet for a long moment. "The exact number is classified." He finally said, "But I can tell you this. Every human colony, every orbital station, every industrial complex in our space has been building warships and support vessels for 2 centuries. We have been preparing for a war we prayed would never come. Now it is here." He turned back to face her. "I am going to send a message to Earth Command." Hassan said, "I am going to tell them we need everything they can send an ambassador. When the full fleet arrives, your people need to be prepared." "Prepared for what?" Vareth asked. "To see what humanity becomes when we stop holding back." The transmission to Earth took 6 days to reach home and return. During that time, the human fleet worked tirelessly to repair damaged vessels and establish defensive positions around Council Core World's human engineering teams coordinated with Council technical staff, sharing technology and tactical data with a generosity that surprised Tevrin. "They are not acting like conquerors," said to Vareth. During one of their daily briefings, "They are acting like allies. They are acting like people who understand what it means to face extinction." Vareth corrected. She'd been spending more time with the humans, learning their history, their culture, Their mindset, what she found, both inspired and horrified her when Earth's response finally arrived. Hassan called an immediate meeting with council leadership. His expression was grim as he played the message from Earth. Command. The face that appeared in the holographic display was that of an elderly human woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. Admiral Hassan, this is Fleet Admiral Chen, Earth's command. She said, your situation report has been reviewed at the highest levels. The United Earth Council has voted unanimously to authorize full military deployment. Hassan closed his eyes briefly. The 2nd, 4th, and 7th fleets are already in transit to your position. Chen continued, total deployment: 4,300 combat vessels, plus support and logistics elements. Estimated arrival time for lead elements: 21 days. Additional ships are being mobilized and will follow as they become available. Vareth felt the numbers crash over her like a wave for 1,000 ships plus the 300 already present. Admiral Hassan, Chen's recorded message continued. You are hereby promoted to Supreme Commander, Combined Fleet Operations. You have full operational authority to coordinate human military response to this threat. Earth stands with the Council. We did not come all this way to watch innocent people die. Chen out. The transmission ended, leaving silence in its wake. Tevrin looked at Hassan with something approaching awe mixed with terror. 4,000 ships. The High Chancellor whispered, that is more than 10 times the combined Council military forces. It is what we have. Hassan said simply, the question is whether it will be enough. He pulled up a tactical display showing the Kresh swarm's projected advance. The swarm is heading toward Council space along multiple vectors. Hassan explained, by the time our reinforcements arrive, they will be within striking distance of your core worlds. We need to make a decision now. Do we defend or do we attack? Attack? Jel said incredulously. Attack a force that numbers in the hundreds of millions. Hassan's expression was like iron. If we defend, we fight a war of attrition against an enemy that converts our losses into reinforcements. Every ship they destroy becomes resources for new Kresh vessels. That is a war we cannot win. But if we strike at the source, you want to attack the swarm's central nexus. Vareth breathed. You want to cut off the head? Every hive mind has a central intelligence coordinating the swarm. Hassan said, my intelligence staff has been analyzing Kresh communication patterns. We believe we have located their primary nexus. It is a suicide mission. Tevrin said flatly. Hassan did not deny it. It is a higher-risk operation with potentially devastating casualties. He agreed, but it is also our only chance to win this war decisively. The Council faces a choice: accept certain death through gradual defeat, or risk everything on one decisive strike. Tevrin looked around at the other Council members. He saw fear in their faces, but also something else: hope. The arrival of Earth's full fleet was a sight that would be remembered in Galactic history for millennia. Vareth stood on the observation deck of the Council's primary orbital station, watching as space itself seemed to birth an armada. The first ships emerged from jump points across a three-dimensional sphere hundreds of thousands of kilometers in diameter. Capital ships, carriers, battle cruisers, destroyers, frigates, and dozens of vessel classes the Council had never imagined. But it was not just warships behind. The combat vessels came hospital ships the size of small moons, their hulls marked with the Red Cross symbol that humans use to denote. Medical facility supply vessels carried everything from ammunition to food, from replacement parts to mobile repair facilities. Troop transports held Marine divisions trained for boarding actions and ground combat. The humans were not just bringing firepower, they were bringing the complete infrastructure needed to wage total war. Final count, Gilles announced from her sensor station, her crystalline form refracting light in patterns that betrayed her amazement. 4,173 combat vessels, plus an additional 8,000 support and logistics ships. Total fleet personnel, approximately 46 million individuals. Tevrin stood beside Varath, all four of his arms hanging limply at his sides. They brought their entire civilization to war. He whispered. No, Varath corrected, understanding finally what she was seeing. They brought the civilization they built for war. Admiral Hassan now, Supreme Commander. Hassan had called a meeting of all senior human officers and council leadership. Conference room aboard the newly arrived flagship, UENS, Unconquerable, was large enough to hold 300 people. And every seat was filled. Hassan stood at the center podium, his uniform bearing new insignia that marked his elevated command. "Thank you all for coming," he began for our council guests. "Let me introduce Fleet Admiral Chen, who commands the 2nd Fleet, Admiral Kowalski of the 4th Fleet, and Admiral Okonkwo of the 7th Fleet together. We represent the full military capability of United Earth." Hassan activated a holographic display that showed the Kresh swarm in terrifying detail, the red mass of enemy contacts. Spread across the galactic arm like a cancer, the Kresh swarm currently numbers approximately 130 million vessels. Hassan said they are advancing on multiple fronts, consuming everything in their path. Standard defensive doctrine would have us establish layered defensive positions and fight a war of attrition. Standard defensive doctrine would lose this war. He manipulated the display, zooming in on a particular region deep within Kresh-controlled space. This is designation Alpha Zero, the Kresh primary nexus. Hassan continued based on intelligence gathered from our previous engagement and long-range reconnaissance. We believe this is the central coordinating intelligence for the entire swarm. It is a biological construct approximately 200 kilometers in diameter. Protected by an estimated 12 million vessels and concentric defensive shells, the room fell silent as people absorbed the implications. "You want to attack that?" Admiral Chen asked, her weathered face showing concern. "Directly assaulting that concentration of forces would be catastrophic." "It would be," Hassan agreed, "which is why we are not going to fight our way through." He changed the display to show a tactical overlay. The Kresh rely on their numbers and regenerative capabilities. Hassan explained they expect us to engage their forces conventionally, to grind ourselves down against their superior numbers. Instead, we are going to use their own biology against them. Commander Tanaka stepped forward, taking over the briefing. "Kresh vessels are all connected to the hive mind through biological quantum entanglement." She said it allows instantaneous communication across any distance, but it also creates a vulnerability. Overwhelming input can cascade through the network, essentially stunning the swarm while the Nexus processes unexpected data. "You want to overload them," Vareth said, beginning to understand precisely. Tanaka confirmed we have developed what we call the Babel Protocol, coordinated strike across multiple fronts designed to flood the Kresh network with simultaneous attacks. While the swarm is processing these distributed threats, our strike force will penetrate directly to the Nexus. Admiral Okonkwo leaned forward. "How do we destroy something that large and that well protected?" he asked. Hassan's expression was grim. "We have authorized the use of Nova-class weapons," he said quietly, though. Human officers in the room reacted with visible shock. Several began speaking at once, until Hassan raised his hand for silence. "I know what I am asking." Hassan said Nova-class weapons have never been used outside of testing. But the Kresh Nexus is too large and too resilient for conventional weapons. We need something that can destroy it completely. Ensuring the hive mind cannot regenerate, Vareth leaned toward Tevrin. "What are Nova-class weapons?" She whispered. The High Chancellor looked ill. "I accessed human weapons databases after the last battle," he replied. Quietly, Nova-class weapons are multi-stage fusion devices designed to trigger temporary stellar-level reactions. They are weapons designed to destroy planets. The operational planning took 6 days. Days during which the Kresh continued their advance, consuming 3 more Council Systems refugees flooded into the remaining safe zones. Their numbers growing with each passing hour. Human ships worked alongside Council vessels to evacuate civilians, with human pilots flying impossible rescue missions into contested systems to pull out survivors. Vareth watched as a young human pilot named Lieutenant Sarah Chen brought her damaged transport out of a collapsing space station with 4,000 B steel. Council civilians aboard. The pilot's left arm was broken. Her ship was venting atmosphere from multiple breaches, and she still made jokes over the communication channel to keep the refugees calm. "That is humanity," Admiral Hassan said. Appearing beside Verath on the observation deck, we are not fearless, we are not invincible, but we show up. Even when we are terrified, because someone needs help. Why? Verath asked, the question that had haunted her since humans first arrived. Why do you care so much about people you just met? Hassan was quiet for a moment, watching the damaged transport dock safely, because we remember what it was like to be alone. He finally said, for thousands of years, we thought we were the only intelligent life in the universe. We fought each other because we had no one else. When your first contact message arrived, it changed everything. It told us we were not alone. It told us the universe was bigger and more wonderful than we had imagined, and it told us that out there, somewhere, were people who might need someone to stand beside them. When darkness came, he turned to face her. You asked for aid, Ambassador, but we did not come here because you asked. We came because the moment you sent that message 200 years ago, you became part of humanity's family, and we protect our family. The day of the operation arrived with grim determination throughout the fleet. The battle plan was elegantly simple in concept, nightmarishly complex in execution. 3 full fleets, the 2nd, 4th, and 7th would strike at crash concentrations across 1,000 light-year front. The attacks would be coordinated to begin simultaneously, flooding the hive mind with urgent tactical data from multiple sources. Hassan would command the strike force, 500 of the fastest, most heavily armed ships in the fleet, plus the Nova-class weapon delivery platforms. Their job was to punch through to the Nexus while the swarm was distracted and deliver the killing blow. All fleet elements report ready. Commander Tanaka announced from her station. Hassan stood on the bridge of the Unconquerable, surrounded by holographic displays showing the positions of over 4,000 ships around him. His bridge crew worked with focused intensity. These people knew that many of them would not return from this mission. Send to all ships. Hassan ordered, today we fight not for conquest or glory, but for survival. The council races face extinction, and we have been given the honor of standing in the breach. Many of us will not see tomorrow, but our sacrifice will ensure that billions who come after us will live free from the shadow of the swarm. This is not our galaxy. These are not our people, except that all people are our people. And all causes of justice are our causes. All ships. Begin Operation Mongoose. The galaxy erupted in fire across 1,000 light-year front. Human warships engaged crash forces with everything they had. Nuclear weapons painted space with temporary. Since railguns hurled death at relativistic velocities. Fighter pilots threw themselves against biological horrors with desperate courage. The crash hive mind, suddenly facing coordinated attacks from directions it had not expected, reeled under the unexpected assault for critical minutes. The swarm's attention fragmented as it tried to coordinate responses across multiple fronts. In those minutes, Hassan's strike force moved. 500 ships accelerated toward the Nexus at velocities that tested the limits of their inertial dampener. Ste hit the outer defensive shell like a tungsten spike driven by a nuclear hammer. The crash defenders responded with savage intensity, but they were a fraction of a second too slow. The hive mind was still processing attacks. Light years away, Hassan's force punched through the first defensive layer, losing 40 ships in the process.